In the last section, we explored Daniel's lion, bear, and leopard beast, being Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece, and the fourth terrible beast being the Roman Empire. We found the first three of these again mentioned in Revelation 13 as a leopard, bear, and lion, with John looking backward at those empires in the reverse order, and the seats of those kingdoms being Iran, Iraq, and Syria, Lebanon. And continuing within this continuous historic context, that is, that prophecy is fulfilled steadily as the era it's written about gradually unfolds, find that while the Lord revealed 4 kingdoms to Daniel, for him in turn to reveal to Nebuchadnezzar, over 500 years later, the Lord revealed 8 successive kings, which are also referred to as beasts, to John, detailed in the 17th chapter of Revelation. Now, Daniel defined beast for us as a kingdom. Now, in order to understand Revelation, we have to understand what the author was assigned to do. And in 1:19, we learn, write the things which thou hast seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter. The thou is John, so we should look through his eyes and consider this ethnographic view. It's what was in his past, and which are in his present, and which shall be in John's future toward the end of the 1st century. Now, in Revelation 17:10, we learned there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Now, there's a broad consensus that the first 6 of these beasts, and this you can Yahoo this, are Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and the Roman Empire. There's no shortage of Bible scholars that understand that, and we got into that a little bit back in our Daniel discussion. We can see that the 5th fallen king, the 5 are fallen, would be Greece, because that was fallen in his past. And John lived under the Roman Empire, which would be the beast that is. 5 are fallen, 1 is. That would be the Roman Empire. The other's not yet come. Now, it's a matter of historical record that the Roman Empire fell to the Islamic first jihad and so that would be the beast or king that had not yet come. It's a simple historical matter of fact. And the Islamic first jihad took over nearly the whole world in that move, the whole known world. And then in the next verse we read, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. And so we know that the term beast is assigned to all these kings as well. And Daniel defined a beast as a kingdom. So we know these are kingdoms, and there is that broad consensus on the first 6. And so the 8th was before John, and so it's part of those before him, but is not, so it's not about the Roman Empire. Even it is the 8th and is of 7, or could be of the 7th, and it has the same kind of spiritual condition. These are successive kingdoms that oppress God's people all the way through time. And Isaac Newton suggested the beast that was and is not, being wounded to death with a sword, he is the 8th and is of the 7. He was therefore a collateral part of the 7th. And I believe that's probably a pretty good view. We learned back in 13:1 about the leopard, bear, lion, beast, or the Islamic Empire, that it had 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, the beast rising up out of the sea, later on in Revelation, we learn that the sea is peoples, tongues, and nations. And so these are kingdoms that rise out of people, tongues, and nations. Now, the 7th head, these heads are Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, the Roman Empire, and the Islamic Empire. So the 7th head is the Islamic Empire, and we learn in 13:3, one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. There's a bit of a parenthetic because it's repeated again later on in this chapter, that his head was wounded to death. Well, the deadly wound that was suffered by the Islamic Empire was suffered by the Islamic first jihad at the hands of Charles Martel in the Battle of Tours, France. And this was the death knell of the Islamic first jihad. They made one ill-fated attempt at a comeback, but they were relegated. They never had the power they had at that peak of that first jihad to that battle until recent times, when they were healed by Western wealth transfer in oil purchase, as well as the development of that oil. So the Islamic first jihad was healed by the West, which we'll find is the two-horned beast, of those two horns being the Crusades and the British Mandate. Now here are maps of these successive kingdoms, and this makes it very clear. And these are approximate areas that these kingdoms possessed. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and those are the five fallen. One is the Roman Empire. We don't even need a map because that's not what it's about, because the seventh had not yet come. You must continue a short space. The Islamic first jihad lasted 152 years, which is a short space indeed compared to these empire kingdoms. And so then the Islamic first jihad, and that was wounded to death in the Battle of Tours, France. And then the eighth beast, part of that seventh head of the Islamic Empire that had not yet come, is the Islamic second jihad in the image of the first jihad. We can see the first jihad, second jihad. The Holy Land was physically and spiritually desolated by Islam through the exile of Christians and Jews. In the History of the Jews, Paul Johnson wrote on page 321, between 1827 and 1839, largely through British efforts, the population of Jerusalem rose from 550 to 5,500, and in all Palestine it topped 10,000, the real beginning of the Jewish return to the Promised Land. This was the restoration of the Jews, the beginning of the restoration of the Jews. And in the early 1800s, try as I might, you can find little to no history on Jerusalem or Israel, because virtually nobody wanted it. Certainly just a few of the Jews. And then as they built that country, they hired the local Arabs, and the Arab populations increased along with the Jews through their employ. Please visit IsraelandBibleProphecy.com for much more about these beasts.